Ladies and gentlemen, we got some very exciting information to share with you. This is a very important day. And I know that October 7th is already kind of dedicated for the remembrance and the importance of what happened in Israel that is spreading across social media. But I would say this is also very highly significant of this particular day, especially here in Canada. This is the final decision of Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. This is the final sentencing prosecution day of the Ontario court system. This is the big news that's happening nationwide that people did not really knew about until this exact moment. We've been trying to cover as much as possible here on this channel, and we got some very interesting news. So the Crown Courts, you remember the Crown Courts initially asked for and demanded 7 to 8 years for Tamara Lich and Chris Barber in prison. 7 to 8 years in prison for organizing the Freedom Convoy. And it looks like there's some happy news in regards to this. But before we get into the actual sentencing done in the Ontario court system, I want to show people this to just give people a reminder of how gruesome this long trek of trials has been for Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. And the federal government's response to this and how they cross the line, how they cross boundaries when it comes to legality. And as Wiretap Media points out, the federal government was found guilty of breaking the highest laws of the land, but the only people facing political prosecution today are Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. Whether you sit on the right or the left side of the aisle, the outcome of today's proceedings should be a concern to all Canadians. And that's why I said this should be the highest significance of our country. That two predominant Canadians, that their only crime is bringing people together for a demonstration in front of the Parliament buildings to protest against the authoritative mandates during COVID. That's the only crime that they committed. They brought Canadians together for a peaceful demonstration. And they got severely prosecuted for it. They were trying every which way to Sunday to try to force them into prison. The only thing they could charge them with was mischief. And they wanted to send them to 7 to 8 years in prison for mischief for organizing a protest. So I just want to show people this. It's a fairly lengthy video, so we sped it up a bit. But here is kind of a breakdown of what led up to this exact moment.
A so-called Freedom Convoy.
So-called Freedom Convoy.
We've heard it called a nationwide insurrection.
A threat to democracy, an insurrection, sedition.
The police chief is calling it a nationwide insurrection. This city is under siege. They are now calling it an occupation.
What we are facing today is a threat.
By the way, calling this an insurrection may be the most hilarious, ignorant thing I've ever heard coming out of the Freedom Convoy. An insurrection. You mean the people that weren't even on Parliament grounds participating in this? They were on the streets. They were far away from any government building. It's kind of hard to do an insurrection when you're at a large distance. It's kind of hard to do that. It's kind of hard to overthrow the government and turn over democracy when you're a far distance away from the entrance of the Parliament building. Just like they said about January 6th, that was an insurrection. But gosh darn it, they did not have the rifles or guns to actually commit an insurrection. Go figure. A bunch of Second Amendment gun nuts, and they forgot the guns. It kind of seems like a coincidence. Almost seems like it's a Fedsurrection. But they called this an insurrection to try to discredit it. And here's Chrystia Freeland, which is ironic that her name is Freeland and she's the exact opposite, demanding to pursue emergency powers action, freezing bank accounts, and attacking and demonizing Canadians.
Threat to our democratic institutions, to our economy, and to peace, order, and good government in Canada. This is unacceptable. It cannot stand, and it will not stand.
The
small fringe minority holding unacceptable views that they're expressing.
In a rare and aggressive move, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoking the Emergencies Act to crack down on anti-vaccine mandate protests.
If you are involved in this protest, we will actively look to identify you and follow up with financial sanctions and criminal charges.
I just want to remind people, this was an anti-mandate protest. A lot of these people that turned out to this event were vaccinated. This is not about anti-science or anti-vaccine or anti-health. This is about putting the pressure on the government that gave an authoritarian mandate onto its people. They lied to you. They lied to you and then brutalized you for pointing out those lies. Brutalized you, our own Canadians.
As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order.
Canada is a rule of law country. By declaring a public order emergency under the Emergencies Act, we are following the law, and we are acting within it. There are clear conditions set out.
We're not using the Emergencies Act to call in the military.
Canada's reputation is indeed at risk. We need to show the world proactively that we won't let this happen again. Our trade corridors will remain open. We should think about putting the military in place to keep the border crossings moving, even after the protesters were removed, to send a clear signal. And your response though here is couldn't agree more with those points. We must make clear that one, we'll resolve this, and two, we won't let this happen again.
So what that shows is that they lied. They lied under oath. That no, we were not going to use the military. We're not going to launch the Emergencies Powers Act, the authoritarian crackdown of our own citizens, the only thing we've done since World War II. You know, we're not going to go after our own people using the military. Well, turns out that's exactly what happened. Internal text messages pointed that out. Communications between the Deputy Prime Minister and the Safety Commissioner, the RCMP, and Ottawa Police. We're communicating with each other on whether or not to bring the military to crack down on our own civilians. So they lied to you. They lied to you. They broke breach of trust. They went overreaching authoritarian. They cracked down on innocent protesters. And they froze bank accounts, which they're still doing, by the way. They're still freezing bank accounts. They're still restricting people of bank access. So don't tell me that they did this only because of the Freedom Convoy. They did it during the Freedom Convoy as a testing grounds for them to take upon themselves to decide your financial wills. And that's what they're doing right now. And it's going to get worse as time goes on if they implement a digital ID. Just saying. Anyway, let's see the rest.
So can you explain your response there? And were you agreeing there that bringing the military to patrol the border was a viable option?
No. It was, I mean, look, if you look at that.
The exchange goes on to talk, you say, and the CAF if necessary. Mr. Mendicino writes, how many tanks are you asking for? I just want to ask Anita how many we've got on hand. You respond, I reckon one will do. On February 2nd, or at any other point, were you seriously suggesting that CAF be brought in, or that there be tanks brought in to Ottawa to deal with the situation?
No.
We're not suspending fundamental rights or overriding the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Justice Richard Mosley ruled that the federal government violated two sections of the Charter. Freezing bank accounts was an unreasonable search and seizure, and the nationwide order to stop protesting violated the right to free expression.
We are not limiting people's freedom of speech. We are not limiting freedom of peaceful assembly. We are not preventing people from exercising their right to protest legally.
The federal court this week ruled against the government and their invocation of the Emergencies Act to clear out the 2022 convoy in Ottawa. The judge, handing the decision down, concluded the invocation, quote, does not bear the hallmarks of reasonableness and was not justified in relation to the relevant factual and legal constraints that were required to be taken into consideration.
We do not agree with this decision, and respectfully, we will be appealing it. It was a hard decision to take. We took it very seriously, very seriously.
So you're confirming that accounts have been frozen, both personal and corporate.
After a lot of hard work, after a lot of careful deliberation.
If someone asked you, when did the Emergencies Act come into play as a possibility, how would you answer that?
As an idea, it would have been from the very beginning.
The public safety of Canadians was under threat.
The fact that there was not yet.
Again, they wanted to make the excuse of public safety was under threat. That's why we got to beat up our own civilians. We got to beat up Canadian citizens because public safety is under threat. You could catch a virus. That's why we got to crack down on people and smash their heads against the pavement. We got to beat them half to death with officers to protect your health. Do you see how garbage this is? Do you see how hideous these lies are? How open this is? It's apparent to anyone with a functioning brain to look at this and go, wow, this has nothing to do with health. This has nothing to do with COVID. This is about Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, and Mark Carney, who is advising Justin Trudeau on this, to go after Canadians. This is perjury against Canada. And none of the people in this video, none of the people that pushed for this authoritarian crackdown using the Emergencies Powers Act, none of them got jail sentence. None of them got onto trial. But they did crack down on 2 Canadians that brought the country together at a time where we were the most divided. And we're still pretty divided. They went after Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. 2 Canadians that brought the country together for a peaceful demonstration. They even told the people at the event, please be respectful. Please understand that we're not here to commit violence. They reached up upon the aisles to make that point across this event, stating that this is not a violent protest, that this is for a peaceful demonstration. Outside of Parliament, on the streets of Wellington Street, nowhere on Parliament grounds, so they can't use the insurrection claim because they were nowhere on Parliament grounds whatsoever. It's kind of hard to overthrow the government that way. And all they had to do to stop this was this guy, Justin Trudeau, the former Prime Minister, just had to talk with the truckers, have a negotiation. That's all he had to do. But what did Justin Trudeau do? He ran away. He ran away. He told people he got COVID and hid in his basement. And then mandated Chrystia Freeland and others to crack down on their own constituents, crack down on Canadians. That's what they did. So I just want to remind people that has been going on for years. This lying, this manipulation, this crackdown of 2 predominant Canadians, the very humble people that got the worst of the worst, even though these individuals broke the laws to the highest order. They broke Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's very apparent and open for people to understand this, that they are criminals. They are liars. They are psychopaths. And they have not gotten a single cent. They have not lost their jobs. Chrystia Freeland, just until recently, just got reshuffled when Mark Carney became Prime Minister. None of these people are getting a jail sentence. But Tamara Lich and Chris Barber were about to. But there's some news about this, ladies and gentlemen. So, Convoy leaders Lich and Barber given conditional sentences. So remember we told you that the Crown was demanding 7 to 8 years of a prison sentence for these 2? Well, they're no longer serving that. According to this new ruling. They don't have to serve the 7 to 8 years. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. But there's still some provisions because, again, as we explained before, they spent this amount of time, wasted this amount of money, this amount of public interest to try to crack down on these 2. They couldn't come up with any evidence to back their claims of, organizing a riot, of violence. They couldn't find any evidence to back the claims that it was an insurrection, it was white supremacists, it was whatever crap they said on CBC. They couldn't find any evidence for. So the most they could only do was try them a mischief. That's it. And they wanted to give 7 to 8 years of prison sentence for mischief. So now it looks like they're not serving that jail term. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. But let's see where this goes. So Freedom Convoy leaders Tamara, Lich, and Chris Barber were both given 18-month conditional sentences Tuesday for their roles in the protests that blockaded downtown Ottawa for several weeks. Lich and Barber were found guilty of mischief in April, while Barber was also found guilty of an additional offense of counseling others to disobey a court order. In an Ottawa courtroom packed with Lich and Barber supporters, Justice Heather Perkins-mcvey sentenced Barber to 12 months of house arrest and another 6 months under strict curfew. Lich will serve 12 months of house arrest and 3.5 months under a curfew after giving credit for days spent in custody before she was convicted. Both have a series of exemptions associated with their house arrest, allowing them to work, attend medical appointments and worship services, and run errands like getting groceries. So that's kind of good. It's not great. I mean, you're cracking down on people that are the most innocent in all this. But it's better than a almost decade-long prison sentence, which is what the Crown wanted in the first place. But they couldn't find any evidence. They couldn't back their argument to say these two were guilty of the crimes that they were committing. And even with the mischief charge, it's very vague. It's very, they don't have evidence to back the claim that they were committing mischief charges. And the only reason that they're charged with that is because it was the only way to gain back the respect of the Crown, of the judicial process that pretty much just made a circus out of this. That they've had endless trials, they had to reschedule, they had to cancel, they had to move appointments, they had to come back for a mistrial. It was an absolute joke. It was an absolute joke. So they just deemed them, we're charging them with mischief because we got to do something about this. Otherwise, people will look at us and go, well, the judicial system is complete crap, which it is. I'm not giving them any credit. I'm not giving them any credit. But it's at least there's a silver lining to this. So Justice Perkins-mcvey said the Crown and defense could not have been further apart on their sentencing recommendations. The Crown sought 7 years in prison for Lich and 8 years for Barber, while the defense wanted absolute discharges. Perkins-mcvey said those recommendations show political and social shims over the pandemic persists, but said her courtroom has no place for politics. So, the Crown was doing political prosecution. The federal government was doing political prosecution. Doug Ford, which, by the way, is responsible for this because this is under the Ontario judicial process. So Doug Ford, the premier, has the authority over this. He's doing political prosecution. But what this judge here, Perkins-mcvey, she's not doing. She's saying, no, we're not going to have a political scheme in my courtroom. So good on her for that. Good on her for that. That's, again, it's not great, but it's better than what the Crown, what the federal government, what Doug Ford was trying to pursue on these two. The judge said no case exactly matched the facts of this case. She cited the mischief sentences for fellow Convoy organizer Pat King and for Marco van Hugenbos, a prominent figure in the 2022 Coates border blockade that was associated with the broader Convoy protests. King received a 12-month conditional sentence in February, but only served 3 months of house arrest with credit for time served pre-trial. Van Hugenbos was sentenced to 4 months in jail in January. Perkins-mcvey said she took to account mitigating factors such as the lack of criminal records and attempts to mitigate the protest footprint by negotiating with police. So they were corrupting the criminal charge. So they were trying to falsify documents. They were trying to falsify criminal records to prove the argument that Tamara Lich and Chris Barber are insane criminals, that they tarnish the reputation of Canadian democracy, that they were trying to overthrow the government, all these ridiculous charges at the start. And they were trying to manufacture propaganda to prove that case, and it turned out to be false. So just note that the government, the Ottawa Police, the RCMP, and all the other key players into this are guilty of conspiring against Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. They did this intentionally. It's not because these two actually committed crimes, but they did it intentionally to put the fear in Canada that anyone partakes in another protest like this, anyone that actually does the diligence to bring this country together to stop authoritarian rule, to stop government overreach, to stop the powers that be, to crack down and go after and penalize us. Anyone that does that, we are going to go with full force against you. That's what this is. That's what all this comes down to. They didn't go after Tamara Lich and Chris Barber because they're criminals. They went after those two because they're the organizers and they want to scare Canada into submission. The city of Ottawa estimates the 3-week protests cost about $7 million and cost the Ottawa Police Service an additional $55 million. Perkins-mcvey said the sentences are meant to serve as a deterrent without discouraging participation in political demonstrations. Justice Charles Hackland made similar remarks when he sentenced King. Diane Magus, Barber's lawyer, said the sentence was in range of those courts have issued in similar cases. The judge was really clear that my client and Miss Lich had been the best intention when they came to Ottawa. It was a lawful protest, Magus said after the sentencing. She found that it turned into unlawful because the blockage of the streets, that's what the message is. Protest, but don't block streets. And you remember, at the time it was happening, at the time of the Freedom Convoy, the real kickoff, what really started and ignited the Trudeau government to go after the Freedom Convoy. It wasn't actually in Ottawa that triggered it. It was when there was protests and blockades on the border bridges. When there was a blockage on the Rainbow Bridge in Niagara Falls and the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor. And that blocked transportation of goods and services across from the United States into Canada, which meant the country was losing billions of dollars. That's when they took it upon their hands to crack down those people. Because when you start losing money, when you start losing business in a peaceful demonstration, that's when all hell breaks loose. That's when the government puts the hoses against you and tries to stop it in full force because you're interrupting capital. You're interrupting business. And that is what puts pressure on the government. That's why, elbows up and the pro-Palestine or the pro-Israel marches are allowed to concur without any significant police presence, without the crackdown of people. Because it's not actually interrupting any business. But if you do a demonstration where you're blocking the roadway of transportation across the border, interrupting trade to the tune of millions and billions of dollars, then they're going to crack down on you. They're going to crack down on you. Lawrence Greaspoon, Lich's lawyer, said his client is considering an appeal of the conviction. In Canada, constitutionally protected freedom of speech which encourages peaceful assembly, must prevail over the rights of property owners, the enjoyment of the property, he said. That's not an equal balance. That is the primary basis that we're considering for an appeal of conviction. So exactly, this is a peaceful demonstration, and under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, they are allowed this by law. They're allowed this by law. And for the people that said, but they're, breaking windows and causing property damage. Again, as I stated before, Ottawa, just like Toronto, just like Vancouver, just like many large metropolitan areas, they all have security cameras. So if they were breaking the law and violating and doing property damage, why are we not seeing the evidence? Why did we not see the evidence of actual physical harm to buildings? Why are we not seeing that? Why are we not seeing people smashing windows if that's what the Ottawa police is saying? Because they're able to pull up CCTV camera footage. But they didn't, because they have no proof. Which we know that's completely false. So, under the criminal code, mischief is defined in part as willfully obstructing, interrupting, or interfering with the lawful use, enjoyment, or operation of property. Lich and Barber were leaders of the protests that drew thousands of people and hundreds of trucks to downtown Ottawa in early 2022 in an effort to get all COVID-19 public health measures lifted. Exactly. That's not anti-vaccine. That's not anti-science. That's not racist, bigoted, xenophobic, homophobic, Nazi, whatever you call it. That is stopping authoritarianism, stopping medical tyranny, protecting people with bodily autonomy, protecting people's rights and abilities to choose their own paths, to be individuals. That's why this is so important. So here's Tamara Lich herself, after announcing the sentencing, the new changes. She says, "Thy will, not my will, be done. Trust this plan. Thank you, Canada, and everyone around the world who has sent love, prayers, and support. No matter what happens today, as Chris Barber told the truckers over the CB radio on our trip out a few years ago, we've already won, guys." I mean, the fact that this got international attention proves that how effective it was, that they actually won. Even though that they got cracked down, they got severely punished by the Canadian government, that they're now enforcing the same measures they did onto them, onto the rest of us, freezing of bank accounts. It brought attention to this. Now people are awake. People are aware of how awful this regime is getting. So here's a little message they put together right before the sentencing.
Hi, everyone. Tamara and Chris live from Ottawa.
Yes.
Why are we here?
Why are we here? We might be going to jail tomorrow, actually.
We're going to do it this way so we don't have to say, we're just waiting for a few people to come on here.
Yeah, that's right. You
Yes.
don't have to wait for a line.
We're here. We both did the 3,000 kilometer journey across, and we're here now, and we're waiting to hear our fate tomorrow morning in Ottawa court at 10 o'clock a.m.
It's at 10 o'clock tomorrow. And we really just wanted to come on and say thank you so much to all of you for all the support these last few years and being a part of this journey with us. And we'll see what happens tomorrow, I guess.
It is what it is. We've been on this path for the last few years. We're here joined with our family and our spouses, so they're just off camera watching right now, probably smiling and snickering. They won't join us on this, but hey, we're here, and we're all here because of people like you standing behind us, so it is what it is.
Thank you so much for the support, Canada. We couldn't have got this far without you, so thank you.
We're here, and we're here till the end, so regardless of what happens tomorrow, everybody, keep your composure. Peace is still
eye on the prize.
Eye on the prize.
Eye on the prize.
Thanks, everyone.
Love you.
Love you.
Yeah, those are very heinous criminals, folks. Thanking, love, support, share, doing the due diligence to put themselves on the front lines to protect and honor the rights and privileges and, what it means to be Canadian. Yeah, that's criminal, according to the catastrophe government of Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, and now Mark Carney, the same people responsible for this mess, just got reshuffled. None of them got criminally prosecuted. None of them got indicted. None of them going to be investigated or held to account of their criminal behavior. But these two individuals. So, Pierre Poilievre made a statement about this. Now, Pierre Poilievre, and I've called him out numerous times about this, has relatively stayed silent about Tamara Lich and Chris Barber. I don't know if it's because politically he thinks that it's a loser, or maybe because of being in Parliament, you have to be part of the club, and being part of the club is you got to stay silent when it comes to opposition, when it comes to actual true opposition of Tamara Lich and Chris Barber going after the parliamentary structure that went after them. I don't know what the case is, but Pierre Poilievre finally made a statement about this. Finally. He says Tamara Lich and Chris Barber peacefully protested the imposition of emergency measures that the federal government found to be unlawful and unconstitutional. Instead of pursuing rapists, drug dealers, and other monsters, the Crown sought lengthy prison sentences. Justice Perkins-mcvey rightfully rejected the Crown's request and sent Tamara and Chris home to their families. We must get to a justice system that ensures the security and freedom of all Canadians. I wish Chris and Tamara a peaceful and happy life. So he never said a word when it came to them being arrested. Didn't say a word about the trials. Didn't say any word about how it's political prosecution. Never said anything until this exact moment. Why is that? Why did he wait till now as the final decision of whether or not Tamara Lich and Chris Barber were going to end up in prison? Did you finally spoke out about this? Again, it's very conflicting. It's very puzzling. Why is that? Is it because you're a coward inside? Is it because you're protecting yourself from the mob? Like, what is it? Why will you not speak out? Especially since you're supposed to be opposing the liberal practices and policies when it came to their overreaching measures during COVID. I thought that's what you guys were doing, but turns out they weren't. And even Viva Fry pointed this out. Viva Fry says, imagine what it might have been if Pierre had said something when they were arrested. Imagine what it would have been if Pierre had said something where Tamara was locked up in jail. Imagine what it would have been if Pierre Poilievre had said something when the Crown was trying to lock up Tamara again on alleged violations of terms of bail. Imagine what it would have been if Pierre had said something during the trial. Imagine what it would have been if he said something during the insane conviction. So he didn't say a word during this entire time until right now. Why is that? Why is that? And why would you not say anything at this point? Like, you're already damaging your reputation by staying silent. What's the point of you now speaking out at the last moment about whether or not Tamara Lich and Chris Barber were going to end up in prison? Again. What's the point of you speaking out about that? Because clearly you have no interest. Clearly you're not there to stick up for them. So what's the point? What's the point of this message? I really want to know. And why did you stay silent all this time until this exact moment? So that's the shame. That's a shame. And that's why Pierre Poilievre is no different than a lot of the Liberal and NDP contenders in Parliament. Like I said, the whole Parliament structure is vastly corrupted, corroded, filled with criminals, filled with people that should be highly investigated, but they won't, because it's one giant club and you and I ain't in it. Just like in the United States, just like around the world, we have no control of our country. We have no control and say in the direction of where policies go towards, who's helping. We have no say whatsoever. We don't live in a democracy. We live in an oligarchy. We live in a world where countries don't really exist to the people that actually rule over us, which is the billionaire class, the elite class of globalists that gather together in their lurches to determine the fates of countries like Canada. That's who really controls us. That's who really runs us. And just to remind people, the real reason why they're cracking down Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, why they did the Emergencies Powers Act, why they did all this, is because they're afraid. It's because they're afraid that Canadians can potentially fight back. And they're trying to scare you into actually thinking that you could fight back. And here's just to remind people, this is from last year. A secret RCMP report warns Canadians might revolt once they realize how broke they are. So that's why they're censoring you. That's why they're being silent. That's why they're demonizing against you. That's why they're freezing bank accounts. Because if Canadians actually realized how screwed up this country is, and it's vastly screwed up, there would be another freedom convoy far greater than what you saw in 2022 from coast to coast. And they're petrified that. So they're taking every measure and opportunity to scare any possibility, anyone, to have that mindset that they can actually fight back. That's what oligarchs do. That's what tyranny does. That's what a totalitarian dictator does. They have to scare you into submission. Because God forbid, Canadians actually having a say in how their government operates, how their services are run, how the country functions for them, not for foreign leaders, not for other people outside the country, but for Canadians. If anyone actually has the mentality to do that, they're going to scare them 9 Ways Sunday to shut it down. Because they got petrified with the Freedom Convoy. They got petrified knowing that Canadians can't come together and fight back. So this is why. This is why they're doing all this. This is why they want digital ID. This is why they want, the freezing of bank accounts for people with the wrong mindset. That's why they're censoring people. That's why they want people off of social media. Oh, you don't have to go onto X. You don't have to go onto TikTok. Just watch CBC. That's how you get your media. That's how you get your news. The liars at CBC. Because they don't want this. They never want this. So they're going to try and demonize you as much as possible to prevent you from gathering together. But I'm telling you that people can get together. We saw with the Freedom Convoy. We're seeing all across the world now with the flotillas going into Gaza. People are protesting. We see it all over the place. So people can unite. People can fight back. It just takes guts. It takes courage, it takes will, and it takes people to put their differences aside and come to commonalities. Like the fact that we all have a common enemy, and that common enemy is the government that rules over us. And they have their own masters that they get their duties from. And those are even a greater evil to our country that we should be also examining and looking at and pursuing. It's not a left versus right issue. It's a top versus down issue. And right now, the Canadian government, the American government, the UK government, all these governments around the world that are operating in coordinates with the WEF and other globalist oligarchs, they're all coordinating together to demonize and attack their own citizens because their own citizens are starting to wake up. That's what's really terrifying to them. That's your greatest weapon. Your greatest weapon is uniting together to fight against it. Don't you forget it.